I'm Tim Pennell from NQA. Can one of my colleagues just confirm you can hear me and you can see the slides, please?
All confirmed, Tim.
Thanks very much, Dom. Hi, I head up the Information Assurance Business Unit in NQA, and if we've spoken before, hello again. And for those of you I've yet to have the pleasure of meeting, welcome to today's joint NQA, To R.I.S.K and West Midlands Cyber Resilience Centre webinar about supply chain assurance and risk management. If you've had the opportunity to listen to any of my webinars about operational resilience or business continuity or information security, then you've probably picked up on a couple of common themes. One is risk and the second is suppliers, and in particular, knowing and managing the cyber risks in your supply chain. But supply chain cyber assurance done effectively is not something that all organizations do, and there are many factors to take into account, so it can be difficult to know where to start and what to do. Well, I'm delighted to once again introduce Dom Owen from To R.I.S.K. Dom truly is an expert on all things supply chain assurance, and he joins me today again to share his experience. And I'd like to introduce Hinesh Mehta from the West Midlands Cyber Resilience Centre, who's here to share his first-hand experience in cyber risk management in the supply chain. He's a leading member of the West Midlands Cyber Resilience Centre, having joined from the Regional Cyber Crime Unit, where he's been developing and building the force's response to cybercrime. Now we've got 45 minutes, which includes time for Q&A at the end. So please type your questions into the chat box. And as ever, you'll receive a recording of the webinar and a copy of the slides. Now, I'm going to start by setting the context and then looking at some of the factors that organizations might consider important to their supply chain. I'll hand over to Hinesh, who's then going to discuss cybercrime and threats to the supply chain. And I'm really looking forward to him then discussing real case studies, followed up by, most importantly, the lessons learned. And if you're not familiar with the cyber resilience centers, he's going to take a quick counter through what they're all about and the benefits to organizations. Dom takes over and he'll take you through the framework for managing risk, with a particular focus on the lifeblood of an organization, the data and the information it processes. And then I'll finish up with discussing how ISO management systems standards can help them manage the cyber risk in your supply chain. And then finally, I'll wrap everything up with some pre-contract and in-life strategies for managing those risks to your supply chain. And then, of course, we'll have Q&A. Now, we've got a lot to get through today, so I'm going to dive straight in, talking about the context of the supply chain. Now, one of the fundamentals of organizational operational resilience is the supply chain, that continuous flow of raw materials and services that organizations must constantly consume. But it's now apparent how brittle some supply chains are, thanks perhaps to Brexit and COVID. Business practices such as just-in-time, lean, and other methods have thinned out businesses to maximum efficiency, but with very little toleration of disruption. And they're great until, say, a cyber attack breaks them. Some of those issues include suppliers implementing new procurement channels that organizations have difficulty adopting. High-risk contracts can be like a house of cards, where they're underpinned by only a few critical suppliers and their IT processes. And most importantly, for today's webinar, the increased dependency on remote IT systems, presenting new opportunities to hackers and cyber criminals. It's what we call an increased attack surface. Now, industry research suggests there's a variety of challenges. There's a shortage of experts to provide insights into supply chain cybersecurity vulnerabilities. And in fact, there's a general shortage of IT security experts. Because of that, they don't come cheap. And many organizations possibly don't have the right people on the payroll anyway. Not all companies have a single view of their data and their systems inventory. And that inventory, as a set of data, may exist outside the business in their suppliers. So where is it, and is it secure? And then suppliers hiding bad news, masking issues isn't unheard of. And while it's the law to report certain data protection breaches, there isn't necessarily an equivalent to report cybersecurity attacks. Now, in conversations with our clients, we've seen that they've begun rethinking their supply chains in terms of cyber resilience. The vulnerability to supply chain disruption as a consequence of something cyber-related happening. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a cyber attack. It could be as simple as an IT failure. And through my role as an ISO auditor, I get to talk to many organizations. And it's been very interesting to see their different approaches to the current business environment. Firstly, there's been a significant increase in interest in business continuity management. And that requires organisations to conduct a business impact analysis, which includes supplier dependencies, and to conduct evaluations of partners and suppliers. And secondly, many organisations have shifted most of their employees to home working and declared their business continuity plan to be effective. Yet, I would argue that in most cases, a successful response to the initial stages of the pandemic did not depend on pre-established business continuity arrangements. What this also suggests to me, and I've seen some evidence of this, is that organisations are not aware they've increased their cyber attack surface by sending everyone home. They've not re-evaluated their IT security as a consequence. And these organisations are part of another organisation's supply chain, so they're putting themselves and their customers' operations at risk. It's not quite a house of cards, but it needs careful scrutiny. And increasingly, businesses are shifting all their IT to the cloud. And of course, the cloud, it's secure, isn't it? In fact, this is a golden age for managed service providers, yet it's apparent that their customers aren't holding them to account. It really is a case of all the eggs in one basket. When I challenge customers on how secure their data is, and do they know how well their service provider is performing, more often than not, they just don't know. And I want to emphasize that all customers really should challenge their service provider on security. So in that context then, let's draw on Hinesh's experience, and I'll hand over to him.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you both for the introduction and the invite to today's webinar. I really appreciate being invited to this. So just a little bit about me then. I work for the police. I've been in the police now for 17 years. Done various roles in and around cyber and technology. Prior to joining the police, I was actually a software developer. So I used to develop applications using Java, which was great fun. But joined the police and done various different roles, but in the main one I have concentrated around technology, and one of the biggest things that's happened in my time in the police is the explosion of people using different forms of tech, whether that's a mobile phone, whether that's using social media, and as investigators we need to stay on top of that. So I've sort of specialised in that area. And go alongside with that is the increase in cybercrime as well. So I've done quite a lot around that. And the job I've just come from is heading up the regional cybercrime unit for the West Midlands. And what we do there is we investigate all manner of attacks. That's everything from serious network intrusions, ransomware, malware, right down to social media account takeovers, which actually is still one of the main ways that people get into your system. So I've done quite a lot around cybercrime and their attacks. I have seen firsthand the devastation that it causes, so I will go to a little bit more about what that looks like and what we can do to try and help ourselves. Can we move forward, please? Great, so just a few stats there, just highlighting what is currently going on. The digital economy is worth £400 million per day to the UK, again, staggering numbers. 80% of cyber attacks start in the supply chain. And I'll be honest, when I did the preparation for this presentation, I saw that stat and it actually shocked me. 80%, that's massive. And again, hence why we're trying to do all our best in terms of working together to try and stop this. £130 billion lost to consumers annually. And this is so important, it's been classed as a tier 1 national security threat by the UK government. What does that mean? It means it's on the same level as terrorism and the impact that it can cause, and hence why we're having quite a lot of funding within central government to try and help people, to try and help organisations to stay one step ahead. And just a key line there, that law enforcement needs to work in partnership. We have to work together to try and solve this problem. I've talked with colleagues several times over. If on my old team, someone had trebled the size of my team, made them work 24 hours a day, we still wouldn't scratch the surface of cybercrime. The volume is so large, the jurisdiction issues are again quite varied, and therefore we have to work slightly differently. We can't arrest our way out of this problem. Could we move forward, please? Right, so what I've got on the screen now is just a few headlines of things that have happened over the last few years. And I won't go into detail into each one of these attacks, but the reason why I point this slide out is purely because of the fact that data is a commodity. It's the one thing I've been trying to get across to organisations for a long time now. The data that you hold is valuable. It's just as valuable as any other asset you might hold. If you've got a safe in your building, if you've got valuable IP that you're holding, it's just as valuable as any other asset, and therefore you should try and secure it the best way that you possibly can. The examples there clearly show a range of different attacks where information has been stolen. And one thing I will talk about a little bit later, again with the case study, is if this was your business and your data was leaked out onto the open, how would you feel about that? What would the reputational damage be? What would your clients say? And just have that in the back of your mind, because that's the reason why we're trying to help you all stay secure. So if you could move forward again, please, while I just move my cat to the floor. Just a quick quote from the NCA here, the National Crime Agency. And again, it just highlights the issue of joint working here. It says the cyber arms race is likely to be an enduring challenge, and an effective response requires collaborative action from government, law enforcement, industry regulators, and critically business leaders. Again, this just highlights what I'm saying. We have to work together to try and stop this problem. At the minute, Tim talked quite well about the fact that businesses work with MSPs, the fact that the attack surface has increased. Those two things are some of the most important bits that I drew out what he was saying, and it's really, really true. The attack surface is getting bigger. The resources that the baddies are getting are also increasing as well, and the complexity and the sophistication. So we have to work together to try and solve this problem. Can we move forward, please? Great. So we'll talk a little bit now about the supply chain, and I know we've gone into great detail with Tim's presentation, but just a few points to raise from this. So one of the main things is just talking about interconnected systems and that level of trust. Most of us will work with a wide range of suppliers. Each one will have a different reason for being there. Each one will work with its own software providers, perhaps its own MSPs. And what sort of knowledge do we have about what they're doing? A lot of times I talk to victims and they say, well, they know a little bit, but not that much, because they just get on with it. We've worked with this company now for 10 or 15 years. We have trust. And what I'm saying is absolutely have trust. These are good people, but actually dig a little bit deeper, because the environment has changed in the last 10 years. And we need to dig a little bit deeper into what that trust means. It doesn't just mean trust a word of mouth. It means trust into the systems that you allow to connect to yours. One of the biggest attacks to do with the supply chain was an American attack for a chain of supermarkets called Target. And the attack has actually got in through air conditioning system, something that most people wouldn't even think twice about. And when I've worked in business as well, my air conditioning supplier, God, I wouldn't know who that was. I'd have to go and find stick on the wall. So actually trying to make sure that you've got just a general overview of who your suppliers are and what that level of trust is. And the next time there, an understanding of controls and how to mitigate. So I do not expect anybody that I work with, either on the Cyber Resilience Centre or in the police, to be a technical expert. It's just not something we're ever going to achieve. What I do want people to understand is a little bit of basic knowledge about what controls are. What is antivirus software? What does it stop against? What is a password policy? How does that help us? And then the problem in our world is that we'll throw around phrases like brute force attack. And there's loads of phrases that I could bombard you with in technical jargon. It puts people off. I genuinely believe that just a little bit of security awareness knowledge can take you very, very far. You don't need to know the technical details, but you should understand why it's important to have a password policy that you are enforcing within your organization. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Software vulnerabilities, again, it's a phrase that puts people off. What is software? What's vulnerability? I don't expect people to be experts about this, but just keep an eye on the media, keep an eye on the news. There's been quite a lot of vulnerabilities that have been spoken about in the press recently, and that seems to be increasing from being a bit of a niche area of the media to actually being headlines in the BBC now. So if you see something, just keep an eye on it. Who has access? Who are your suppliers that have access to your systems? You can talk about federated systems and all these sort of things like single sign-on. Don't worry about that. Who has access to the information that you hold? And the last bit there is to hold companies to account. These are businesses that are doing business with you. Hold them to account about their security posture. What are they doing to safeguard your data? And these are really important factors to consider. If you could move forward, please, Tim. Right, so I'm just going to talk about a quick case study now that we've dealt with on a small business that was based in Warwickshire. Now, this business worked on supplying education materials, okay? A really, really good company. Their clients speak very highly of them. Their testimonials are also fantastic. And then what they did is they would send supplies to schools, to educational establishments, and they're really good, working with a variety of different pieces of software. Now, one of the key bits they did, they outsourced some crucial elements of their business. And they'd been working with these people for about 4 or 5 years now, and they'd always had a good service. They'd been assured about the security posture, and they trusted them. However, they didn't probe any further into that. And one day they received an attachment, and it had within it an embedded malware. That then got sent out to all their clients again, and it caused significant issues. So if you could just move forward, please, now. What did that do? It led to a piece of Trojan malware being installed on a client. And Trojan malware, all that is it's a sneaky bit of software that will sit on your computer and it will sit there stealing data. Okay, and that's what it did. It did exactly that. It stole customer data. As a result of that, the first time that anybody knew about this was when their clients reported fraud to them. And they did some digging and they found this malware was on there. They called in the police, they called in the supplier to try and help them. And again, this created a large degree of reputational damage. This was a good company. They were doing some really good work, but their mind was not on security. And for all the right reasons that I'm sure we all understand, they want to increase revenue, they want to increase their customer contact, they want to make sure they supply a quality product. But what goes hand in hand is making sure that those customers and that the data is also secure. They had a massive loss of faith, actually, and they lost around 20% of their clients. Because the areas that they work in is also quite sensitive too, involving some really sensitive data. So you can imagine the reputational damage that they suffered from this. I'd like to think they are back to where they were before the attack, but obviously we've had the pandemic too. Don't underestimate the impact that this can have on your business. So if we can move forward, please. So what are the lessons learned as a result of this? I talked about it earlier, but security awareness training. When we talked to their staff, nobody really understood the fact that when you're emailing a document to somebody else, just because that email has come from a trusted source does not mean that email or the attachment with it is secure. And that was the biggest vulnerability here. Staff hadn't noticed, they hadn't realised, they hadn't even put it through their AV, their antivirus software. So again, some real basic lessons that could be learned from here. And it goes back to what I'm saying, just a general awareness of some security issues and cybersecurity would be really helpful here. One of the biggest issues I want to talk about, data certification, making sure that your supply chain is certified. We will talk about Cyber Essentials Plus on the Cyber Resilience Centre. It's a government-backed initiative which gives you some assurance that the company that you're working with has looked at their security. And again, who are your clients? Who are the people that you're dealing with? What would the impact on them be if you were to lose their data? Just things that they hadn't really considered prior to this attack taking place. So can we move forward now, please? So again, I've told you the problem now. I've described to you what's actually happened there in the real world. How can we help you? So very recently now, we've been going for about 6 to 8 months now. We've created the Cyber Resilience Centre for the West Midlands. And this is very unique. It's a joint public and private sector partnership to try and help strengthen SMEs. And the reason for that is quite simple. I've spoken to you now about how vulnerable SMEs are. And when I was working on the regional cybercrime unit, I would get a list of crimes that were coming in on a weekly basis. And we saw a shift change, certainly over the last 5 years, where our attackers were going to the big companies, they were touching the corporates because that's where the money was, to them stopping from doing that and going to the SMEs. And the question is why? The reason is because big companies tend to have IT departments. They have a stunning army of professionals to help them guard against attacks, and when they are attacked, how to recover from them. Our SMEs just don't have that luxury. They don't have that privilege. They're working in other areas. You know, I've got a cake shop here on a picture. Would they consider themselves to be a technology-led company? The answer would be no. They make cakes. But how are they processing payment data? What customer data are they holding? Are they printing off labels? Where's that information kept? Are they using cloud services for payroll, for tax receipts, all that sort of stuff? And when you look at it in that perspective, actually they are a technology company and the data they hold is valuable. So again, what we're trying to say is that SMEs unfortunately are vulnerable. The government has looked at this and said the loss is actually so large, we need to do something about this, hence creating the Cyber Resilience Centre. And what we're doing is we're working with a range of partners, Tim, Dom, and a variety of partners around the West Midlands to try and reassure SMEs that we can get you a service that can help you stay more secure. So can we move forward now, please? So this is just a testimonial that we've had. This person we know really well. They've had some really good relations with the CRC, and I'll let you read through that. But I know this person, and what we do is with each single person that signs up to our centre. We'll have a sit down with them. We'll go through them. What is their business? What are they trying to achieve? What is their footprint on the internet? What is their system like? And what can we advise them to do? And we've had some really, really good feedback so far. So if you could please move forward now, Tim. I talked a little bit about Cyber Essentials during this, and I can't recommend this enough. As I say, it's a government-backed initiative, and what it does is it gives you a level of assurance that the supply that you are relatively secure, and you can use that as an advert, as a marketing tool. Say to other people, you have considered your security posture and you've done something about it. One of the things we've constantly found with SMEs as to why they're not looking into this is uncertainty about the cybersecurity environment. If you put cybersecurity into Google, you'll get tens of thousands of hits. And within that, you've got people who are confused. Well, who do they go to? Who can they trust? And trying to resolve that, we've created a list of trusted partners. That is a group of companies in the West Midlands that can provide you with Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus as a certificate to make sure that you are secure and you can advertise that fact. If you move forward, please, now. One of the biggest things I'd really like to push you today is our free core membership. So we are giving this membership for free to all organisations with less than 50 employees. You can see the benefits there. We will provide you with the latest NCSC guidance. You'll have access to tools like Exercise in a Box. You'll have a board toolkit, and you'll get regular newsletters and updates from ourselves. I should have mentioned what the NCSC is. That's the National Cybersecurity Centre. It's the leading technical authority in the UK. It is a government body and it's part of GCHQ, so we look to them for our technical expertise, and we'll make sure that that is distilled down, that it's translated into information that you can understand, digest, and hopefully help increase your own security. But again, that membership is free. Please sign up to us, go to our website, there's no charge, and you'll get to sit down with one of the team and just go through where you currently are, what your business is, and how we can perhaps help each other. If you can please move forward now, Tim. The other thing is we do offer paid memberships as well, and these are for people who want to do a little bit more. And they include a range of things you can do. We'll offer some staff awareness training. We can provide quarterly briefings to you. We're currently advising a cyber health kick as well that can hopefully allow you to assess your own organisations, and a few of the benefits there as well. It's on a tiered basis as well. Again, I've talked to you about the free membership. There's absolutely no obligation to sign up to any of these things, but during that conversation, you may feel like this is a benefit to yourselves. So can you move forward now, please? And the very last bit that we talk about is our student services. So there is quite a lot of intention behind what government are trying to do with this project in trying to increase that cyber talent pipeline. Tim talked earlier about the fact that there is a large gap in cyber skills out there. We try to fill that gap. How are we doing that? We're working with several local universities. We're training up their students who are currently there working in a cyber discipline, training up to quite a good standard, and we are then putting them out to businesses to do a range of these services. The reason why we're doing this is to try and decrease the barrier of entry for SMEs. We understand that this is expensive and some of these services can be quite cost prohibitive. We're really trying to make them accessible for SMEs, so the cost is usually a little bit less than you would get from going to a big consultancy firm, but the quality will not decrease. So if that's of interest to you, please do let us know. We've managed to actually secure a discount code. We had to approach Home Office just to make sure that they were happy with this. And if you quote NQA 10 to us, you can have 10% discount off one of those services. Please approach us, please speak to one of us, because I think that there's some real value in some of these services that we're providing. So moving forward now. That brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for your time. I think we'll be doing questions towards the end. I'll now hand you back over to Tim, who will introduce Don. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Hinesh. Yeah, indeed. Over to Don.
Thank you very much, Tim and Hinesh. That was a great presentation. Thank you. Loads of experience. And I just wanted to go into a little bit more detail about one of the things that Hinesh was talking about there, which is obviously about information. So we'll focus on information as one of the core reasons for thinking about cybersecurity risk in the supply chain. Bad people want to get to your information to enrich themselves. They'll either want to connect it to other information they found out about you and your organization in order to cast their net wider. That's what they do. So on screen now is some examples of valuable information that your organization might store, process, or transmit. information about the products or services you provide, the components of those products and services, including those procured from outside the organization, personal identifiable information about your customers and employees, information that might be unique to your organization, and so on. And the value of that information, it can be expressed as a factor of the cost of replacing it, the cost of reputational damage as a result of a data loss event, like a breach, and the extent of regulatory or contractual penalties that may follow as a result of that event. And let's not forget the cost of rebuilding a unique selling proposition that has been stolen from you. But let's also reflect that not all information has the same value. So by classifying information into different categories, you can assess all the information you hold and the level of protection it should be given. So typically speaking, there are 4 categories of information your organization will hold. First one is information that's publicly available, and that will be things like your marketing information, the content in your website, and so on. Secondly is information really for your employees' eyes only. So that might be information about human resources, it might be staff discount scheme, whatever that might be. So internal rules and regs and policies. Thirdly, you've got sensitive information, and that might be information relating to contracts that you hold with suppliers, customers. And then you've got very sensitive information. So that's your 4th category. And that might be something like the information that you hold on your financial ledgers or your risk register or so on. So on the next slide, we're going to look at information as an asset in a bit more detail. So Tim, if I could ask you to move the slide, please. Thank you. So in any organization, entities that store, transmit, or process information of value can be referred to as information assets. Now, strangely, if you do some background reading on international standards, you will find the word asset referred to as a common term or information asset, but you won't actually find an explanation. So a good resource for an explanation is actually the National Archives, which is a UK government department. And they define an information asset, I'm just going to read from it, as a body of information defined and managed as a single unit, so it can be understood, shared, protected, and exploited efficiently. An information asset has a recognizable and manageable value, risk, content, and life cycle. Okay. So information assets can take many different forms. It could be a paper file, it could be an electronic document, it could be a database, or some form of other soft or electronic file, digital file. And each of these asset types is going to be prone to data loss or data theft or data breach. So some of these assets are also going to be held outside your organization. They're going to be physically shared with your third-party suppliers or your customers, or they're going to be held virtually in the cloud. And we refer to an information asset register as a really good way of keeping track of what assets you hold within your organization, what format they're in, what version they're in, who has access to those assets, and why they have access. And the other thing about information assets is your people are also information assets. They've got loads of skills and knowledge in their head, and therefore they're prone to cybersecurity risks as well, often in the form of phishing type attacks, but also as a result of human error or perhaps non-acceptable use of IT, internet, or email. And in the worst case scenario, insider threats by current or former employees or contractors to modify, delete, or disclose confidential information. So as well as storing data about assets in an asset register, being able to track information that flows between assets is really crucial. We refer to that on this diagram as data flows, particularly if that information is commercially or sensitive or personally sensitive. So where you're using sensitive information to make key decisions, what you can identify is what information is being used to inform, recommend, agree with or make a decision, and who's going to perform the outcome of that decision with the information you've used. And that's how you identify the really strategic information within your organization, if it's underpinning those key decisions. Examples might be key performance indicators, net promoter scores about your customer experience, data justifying a business case for investment, that sort of thing. That's what I'm talking about. So that data has real value within your organization, and it really needs to be managed appropriately. So if you've done an information audit recently and you've got a really good handle on both your information assets and your data flows, I think you're well on the way to making your organization safer. But there are also benefits and opportunities here to taking this approach. So you'll often identify assets that you're paying for but you don't need anymore. Data flows that are no longer contributing to that decision-making process I referred to earlier, and just other general process wastage. So generally, audits will always pay for themselves. And I've worked with a number of medium to large organizations over the years that have lost some control over their information assets, and they're often wasting significant sums of money as a result. And as Hinesh mentioned earlier, another benefit of good information control and oversight is the level of reassurance you can give your customers and suppliers that you are a supplier or customer of choice and you can be trusted to do good business with them. So what we're doing next is, and this will be my final slide, we'll refer to information control and oversight as information governance, or IG for short. And we're going to look at IG in a little bit more detail now. So Tim, if you could move me on, please. Thank you. So IG, or information governance, is the management of information within your organization. So even if you're a micro or a small to medium enterprise, you should think about an IG framework. At a basic level, the objective is to specify how you want to manage information within your organization, what types of information you want to manage, and what happens to information that flows in and out of your organization. So what I've put up here is a typical IG framework, quite a simple one. And it comprises, at its core, a group of policies, procedures, guidance, templates, and a continuity plan of what to do in the event of a data loss event, such as a data breach. And the 5 procedures I've shown here, kind of 2/3 of the way down the screen, represent the 5 procedures of Cyber Essentials, which Ines was referring to earlier. Again, it's a UK government standard managed by the National Cyber Security Centre, something that if you want to do business with public sector organisations, you really need to consider. But Cyber Essentials is also really useful if you want to develop a basic level of competence within your organisation relating to cybersecurity. There are 2 flavours. So your basic standard is really a self-assessment supported by an external audit. And the Cyber Essentials Plus is all of that. Plus you can arrange for an external pen test or penetration test of your network. The basic one, I think, Hinesh, tell me if I'm wrong, it's about 300 quid. So I've been through the process myself. It's well worth doing. If information is also going outside your organization to third parties, you also need to think about the contractual obligations and restrictions around your data that you want to put into a contract. And that contract should be back to back with any commitments that you've made to your customers to look after their data. Let's not forget that. So just finally, if you're looking at external accreditations like ISO 27000, which Tim will cover shortly, this type of approach, this type of framework is almost like a building block to achieving that standard. And whatever aspect of information management you're looking at, whether it be the IT security policies, business continuity plans, Cyber Essentials, there are external reference points to help you, which is where NQA comes in. So I'll hand you back to Tim to explain more.
Thanks very much, Dom. And indeed, yes, and leading neatly on then to supply chain assurance and how organizations can seek assurance that their supply chain can remain viable in the face of a cyber attack. And how can organizations demonstrate to their customers that they're resilient to a cyber attack, i.e. they're in the supply chain. I'm going to discuss various risk mitigation strategies at the end of the presentation, but one of the most important, most effective methods, and Dom's just been describing Cyber Essentials, and certainly for customers, is to only procure with organizations that are certified to recognize security standards, e.g. Cyber Essentials. Because of that, these organizations will have undergone an industry standard third-party audit, and they'll have a mark similar to NQAs that's on the screen that tells everyone they can be trusted. And because this is about cybersecurity then, in the supply chain, the most immediate candidate and indeed the most popular information security standard, and this is distinct from Cyber Essentials, is ISO 27001. It's known as a management system standard. And if you're not familiar with these, management system standards are a set of processes used by organizations to systematize continuous improvement. ISO 9001 quality is the most widely used example. 27001 differs in that associated with it are 114 industry best practice security controls. So this means that an organization is operating its security in a continuous improvement loop. And over many years, it's been proved to work. I also said that customers should hold their managed service providers to account. They might not need to if their MSP is certified to ISO 27001. What's key though is that the certification of that 27001 covers the services that you take from them. And you can easily check that by reading the certificate issued to the MSP by the auditing company, such as NQA. All of the big MSPs, such as Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, have 27001 certifications. Now, certification to ISO 27001 is an independent statement of compliance to security best practices, which may be all you need for your own cybersecurity assurance in your supply chain. And of course, it works for all sizes of organizations in all sectors. There are add-ons to 27001. 27017 is information security controls for cloud services, and it's really focused on cloud service customers and cloud service providers. It takes the 114 controls in 27001 and tweaks them to make them specific for cloud services. 27018 is the code of practice for protecting personal information in public clouds. It details the privacy requirements and security control enhancements for privacy to be implemented by cloud service providers. And it's often referred to in association with 27017 because they complement each other. And then there's 27701, which is a very comprehensive and highly regarded privacy extension to 27001. It's being used by organizations to demonstrate compliance to GDPR. It details the requirements and give guidance for the operation of a privacy information management system. It was developed by several data protection authorities from around the world and with input from the European Data Protection Board. Now, it may be that your suppliers are certified to ISO 20000, Information Technology Service Management, but they don't have 27001. You can still draw comfort from 20000 because it also has a section dedicated to security, although it's not as comprehensive as 27001. And then there's ISO 28000, the specification for security management systems in the supply chain, and 28001, which are best practices for implementing security in the supply chain. The management system standards like 9001 and 27001, so they implement a management system, but they are quite old, although the principles still stand. Now, given everything Hinesh, Dom and I have discussed, I'd like to finish with advice for supplier engagement, both beforehand and contract in life. And of course, if you're a supplier, then being aware of these possible engagement strategies will help you prepare. Now, starting with pre-contract, and assuming you already have various contracts in place, what is your policy for supplier engagement? Of course, price and product are probably the most important factors, but can you distinguish between suppliers with whom you have confidence and those you don't have confidence in cybersecurity terms? In order to make that determination, you need to decide what matters and establish that as part of your procurement policy. And in today's context, then that means what type and amount of cybersecurity assurance you need from your suppliers. Therefore, will you define cybersecurity performance measures in contracts? Or perhaps your policy is to mandate only certified suppliers for certain services. Of course, given I'm a certification body, you'd expect me to recommend certifications. But it's not by chance that ISO standards are recognized and used globally. They just work. But I also recognize that they might be considered too much for some suppliers, which is one of the reasons why we also recommend Cyber Essentials Plus, and why we're promoting it here on this webinar. Now, having mentioned performance measures or KPIs, you might reasonably want examples of what good KPIs look like. It's something we're looking into in the West Midlands Cyber Resilience Centre. But in the meantime, the NCSC and the UK government have plenty of free resources. Indeed, the NCSC have supply chain best practices. Google is your friend here. There's also a lot to be said for open source research to see how businesses are performing in cybersecurity. The ICO's website allows you to search for enforcement actions against businesses and individuals. And the news sites, such as the Register, which I highly recommend, are frequently publishing reports on cybersecurity events. This is when RFI or tender questionnaires are very useful, but they have to be used sensibly. I've lost count of the amount of questionnaires I've had to respond to over the years, containing boilerplate questions, half of which aren't relevant to the services that I might be providing to the potential customer. So if you employ questionnaires, ensure they will give answers to the really important questions. This could mean tailoring each questionnaire to each supplier and whatever they provide. And asking sensible questions, then following them up, helps improve the relationship with your suppliers. And then once contracts are let and services are being provided, maintain those relationships. Increase supplier conversations, making a point that security is on the agenda, which is also the ideal environment for the performance monitoring, that is, the conducting the regular reviews. It's often the case that KPIs need fine-tuning. There can be an evolution where KPIs can be dropped and new ones come into being. Conducting your own audits is the gold-plated solution. You'll need to have specified in the contract in advance, though. It also requires a certain expertise on your own part, or alternatively, you can engage a third party in that field. Audits are also disruptive and can be sensitive, and some of the big suppliers, like your Microsoft and your Amazons, just won't entertain customer audits. I'm also a big fan of heat maps. You may well have heard me say on previous webinars how, in my experience, top management don't like the color red. So if you performed a bunch of checks on some suppliers against various aspects, you can rate those suppliers against those aspects on a heat map, putting red where they're bad, and you'll soon get the CEO's attention. It's also worth talking about overall governance. Dom has already touched on that, the framework within which the supply chain management takes place. Even if you're not certified to an ISO standard, I highly recommend the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. It's a tried and tested method of continuous improvement. Okay, and that's that. Let's quickly move on now. So thank you very much, everybody. It's time for you to join in with some Q&A. And you can ask questions of all of us here. Let's open it up and have a look. Okay.
So I think, Tim, you've got one, haven't you? I can see. Is NQA offering 27018 and 27017?
Indeed. Hi, Avril. We can, at the moment, 27018 and 17 are not accredited standards, so we can audit them as unaccredited extensions to 27001. So the answer is yes, but it wouldn't be fully certificated. Thanks for that, Dom.
While we're waiting for other questions, Tim, can I ask Hinesh a question about collaboration with other police forces? So it's a really great initiative that Hinesh has taken us through this morning, but is he aware of what's happening elsewhere, or to what extent police forces are collaborating with each other in this area?
Yeah, thank you for that, Dom. So, I mean, I remain an operational officer, so I'm seconded, which means I'm currently just out of my department working on the Cyber Resilience Centre, and I will be going back in due course. So I retain all the communications I still had beforehand, so I'm well aware of all the different initiatives. There is one, in fact, called Cyber Alarm, which will be hopefully coming to the West Midlands really, really soon. I was hoping this week, but if not, it won't be too long after that. And that's a piece of software, again, a free service from the government, which will sit on your networks to try and monitor the traffic and give you a report if it sees something that could be malicious. It's a work in progress. Hopefully through maybe Tim will get some information out to you a little bit later. But yeah, no, so there's a number of initiatives going on. In terms of the Cyber Resilience Centre, there is actually a question here talking about different policing areas for Derek. So he asked, do other areas of the country have the same support as the Midlands? Yes, they do. I hope that there will be 10 of these centres replicated across the UK in exactly the same format that we've got here in the West Midlands. There are, by the end of this year, hopefully all regions will be covered, but we were one of the first. We are one of the leaders because our region does have quite a lot of cyber expertise. But yes, all areas in the UK will have coverage soon. But hopefully that helps, Dom. Yes, I'm in contact with all my colleagues, and there's a number of initiatives going on around cyber crime and cyber security and investigation that hopefully we can sort of bring as a centre of excellence within the West Midlands, within the CRC.
Thank you.
And I think we've got a follow-up to that question then, Hinesh, is how do people engage with the cyber resilience centres or the services that you talked about? This is from Mike.
Yeah, so our website is probably the first port of call. You can see it on the screen now, wmcrc.co.uk. On there, you will see all the range of services that we offer, the membership levels, and crucially, where you can sign up to free core membership for organisations less than 50. And that's the first port of call. On that, you have my email address there as well. I'll pop another one in the chat box as well. One of our colleagues will help you as well. That's Danielle, who tends to engage a lot with our clients, but happy for either. If you want to speak to me, if you want to speak to Danielle, please let us know. But please be reassured, this if you want to have a chat, it'll be very informal. We'll just talk about your business. We're not here to give you something that you don't need. Our whole intention is to try and make SMEs in the West Midlands safer. So just have a chat with us and see where you can go off there. That'll be the first port of call, our website, and just have a chat with one of us.
Thanks, Hinesh. We've got next question was from Dale Kirkwood, and Dale asks, our suppliers, processors are many large organisations who, like you said, don't take audits and generally don't change what they do, i.e. they have the power, e.g. AWS. What is the best approach for these large suppliers who have the power? Thanks. Well, yeah, that's a good point. Now, the first thing to mention is these large organisations not only publish the fact they've got ISO 27001, they have a number of other relevant certifications or accreditations, for want of a better word. And again, depending on where you're drawing the services from, they may also have things like SOC 2, for example. The thing to note there is they offer a whole bunch of services, and often they just step back and say, you're consuming these services, it's up to you to do what you will with them. And therefore many organizations engage another service provider to enable and provide those services from the likes of AWS and so on. And those are the organizations, in fact, that are easier to hold to account. If you haven't done that and you're engaging directly with one of those major suppliers, then it's very much looking at your approach to security in terms of the way you use their services, how you consume those services, how you've configured them to provide you with the security posture that's fit for you. Naturally, then I would start recommending something like 27001 for yourself, because that will give you a framework in which to determine what kind of security controls you need in place from the likes of AWS and how you would configure them. Finally, I would also add, these organizations also produce quite a lot of detailed information on what kind of business continuity measures, geographical resilience measures, and other such security controls they've got in place above and beyond the talking about their certifications. So you can draw quite a large bit of comfort from that. And finally, I think to finish there, if you look at AWS, for example, there were vulnerabilities with the S3 buckets, for example. A large part of that was really down to how the users were using the buckets rather than typically an issue with AWS. And I think, Hinesh, you're nodding your head there. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, I think you've covered it all, but again, my only slight highlight would be some knowledge about security. I talked about just having a basic understanding of what some of these terms mean. I think are really helpful to organisations. That's the only thing I'd like to add.
Okay, thanks. And I think, Colin, maybe we've answered your question as well, because Colin asked a similar question. If we use larger providers, how can we verify their controls given the size of the company? Or is it better to check our security accounts such as TFI? You're right, Colin. Yes, so hopefully I've answered that question, and the answer to your second part of the question is yes, I would agree with you. And then, to we're an SME with Cyber Essentials, found obtaining it very useful. Hope to go for Plus next time. I hear the questions are changing next week. Do you have any news on the main changes that we're due to renew in June? I don't know. Hinesh, do you?
Sorry, no, I don't. I've never even
okay.
knowledge on that.
We're going to make a note. We'll have your email address and registration. We'll get back to you on that. I'll give you an update if we can. If I ask Sean, who's listening in the background, if you could make a note of that, and then we'll get back in touch. Kathy's asked, does the Cyber Resilience Centre open provide service to businesses to the West Midlands? Hinesh has already discussed these Cyber Resilience Centres are opening up around the country. There is a network of these. Depending on where you're based, Kathy. Sorry, Hinesh?
Sorry, I was just going to say, I know we talk about geography quite a bit, mentioning West Midlands, but what we will take inquiries from anywhere in the country. So generally, drop us a line, drop us an email, more than happy, and we can point you in the right direction if he's not going to be. So don't worry about geography too much.
Okay, and Dale's followed up. Is there one coming to the Northern Ireland?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there is an intention to. I don't have any further details on that. We're a little bit focused on England and Wales, just down to sort of the reach of the Home Office. However, I can find out for you and come back to you if that's okay. Great,
thanks very much. And Nick has kindly answered the question about the changes to Cyber Essentials Plus. Tonino and Avril, they are published. The new question set is published on the IASME website. IASME run the scheme on behalf of NCSC. So there you go. Thanks very much for that, Nick, and it's a free download. What else have we got then? They're coming in thick and fast. I'm just trying to stay on top of these. Oh, and Danielle has said we can introduce you to the centre that is required. Great, thank you, Danielle. Okay, and Rachel is also based in Northern Ireland, but also like information. We're noting all of these, folks, and we will follow up on them. Thanks very much for that. Okay. Any more questions? I'll hold it open for a bit longer. Okay, right. Well, Hinesh and Don, thanks very much indeed for coming on today and sharing your experience with everybody. I hope everybody on the webinar has found that useful. As a reminder, you will be getting copies of the slides and the recording of this webinar as well. Okay, so if you haven't been able to capture everything, don't worry, you will be getting it. Okay. In that case, then, no more questions. I'll close it there, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining today.